Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Youth Rights Podcast. I'm your host, Zane Miller, and today we are going to be discussing something positive for a change. We are going to be talking about stories of positive teachers and the impact that they're having on students, and just kind of using this as an example to showcase the way that teachers should act towards students and the ways that teachers can best support students. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Bailey McCoy, and I am a NYRA volunteer, and I will be sharing my stories and experiences with teachers who were heroic and who did what teachers should do to support students.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll go ahead and just, get into the stories and talk about these positive experiences you've had with your teachers.
For context, I am currently 19 years old, and I was in the foster care system as a minor and had to navigate toxic home environments. And that was definitely a struggle for me a lot. And it also caused me to have trauma responses that presented themselves via emotional regulation issues that I was having. And it was just bad stuff. And I also navigated peers who were bullying and harassing me on top of that at school. And so I had specifically 4 amazing teachers who just supported me in so many beautiful, wonderful ways. And so the first one I'm going to start off with, when I was her student, she was my English and science teacher. And I feel like the biggest role she played for me was being like a protector. Like when I would be getting bullied or harassed, I feel like she would step in to protect me.
Do you have any specific stories of when she's done that, or the type of harassment you experienced that caused her to protect you?
Yeah, so for example, during Thanksgiving break, way back in November of 2024, I had a group of peers who had bullied me online and got into conflict with me online, and that turned into a whole messy thing. And those 2 peers were in my class with this teacher. And when I was in class with them after school came back, when Thanksgiving break was over, both of those peers were giving me creepy looks and looking at me, giving me creepy smiles and harassing me in class. And that teacher stepped in and firmly told them to stop and to do their work. And when they would not listen, when they would not stop doing so, she allowed me to go to the mental well-being center, where I was able to sit and finish my work and feel safe and not have to deal with that. And the next day, I felt kind of nervous to go back to class after all that. And so I was actually in the main office and was too nervous to go to class. Well, that teacher, she walked herself over to the main office and brought me my work, while her paraprofessionals stayed back in the classroom with the kids. And she brought me my work straight to the main office, and she told me personally that she's going to be having a talk with them. And the next day, I felt safe to go back to class. And she actually literally offered me that morning to bring one of them outside and facilitate an apology and stuff like that and make them apologize to me. And so I accepted that offer, and then we had went outside and they apologized to me. And because the teacher asked them was what you did to Bailey okay? And they said no. And then she said, what do you have to say to her? And they apologized, and then they didn't even bother me at all for the rest of the school year ever again.
Wow. That's really good. Yeah, that is a really good story about that. You mentioned something about your school having a mental wellness room. I've never heard of a school that had that. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? That's just interesting to me.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, I mean, not all schools have them. And that's the thing, is that I think it's something that's more recent, and it hasn't been around for years or anything. And I think it's something more recent that only some schools have so far. And my school happened to be one of the ones that had it. And basically what it is they're licensed school counselors and psychologists and stuff like that that are in those rooms and have their own little offices. And students who may be having a mental crisis, or who just need a little quiet space to breathe or whatever, they can go there, and if they need to, they can talk to one of the counselors if they're available. And otherwise, there's a little seating area where they can just sit there and take a moment to quietly breathe and just feel relaxed, and that's basically what it is.
Is it something that you need permission to go to, or can you just like step out and go there?
Yeah, no, usually like if it's class time, you do need permission from your teacher to head over there.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that before. That's probably more common in California where you are, because in Texas, it's
No.
kind of where I am. It's kind of one of the worst states for student rights, so they wouldn't really have something like that. But that is a really good story of the way your teacher supported you and everything. And that kind of is a good example of how teachers should act when they see that students are like unnecessarily causing someone stress and causing someone issues. Do you have any more? Do you have any more stories about that specific teacher, or do you want to talk about another one?
Yeah. So another thing is that also during my senior year, there was a peer who I had that actually had threatened me via a mutual friend, and that was also a whole mess. And it caused me to go to the principal when I heard about the threat, and I told them that I don't feel safe sharing a class with this peer because I had shared a class at the time. And so I told the principal that I don't feel safe sharing a class with that peer after the threats. And I kid you not, this was crazy because it was March, so mid-semester, and it was in 2025. And by the next day, they had my schedule slightly modified upon my request so that I wouldn't have to be in class with her.
Wow.
And it was just crazy because like schools don't just change schedules mid-semester.
Mm-hmm.
And part of me has a feeling she also had a bad record too of some sort.
Yeah.
And so that teacher that I've been talking about, I didn't share a class with the peer with that teacher. But what happened was it was April 2025 and it was state testing for juniors. My class with that teacher had a bunch of juniors, and those juniors went to a different room for state testing, but then seniors from that classroom came over to the classroom that I was in with that teacher. So it was a whole mess.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the seniors that entered the classroom was that peer of mine. And every time I saw her around campus after being threatened, I would literally get visibly shaky. Like my hands would become trembly and I'd have a racing heart. And when she entered the room, I started getting visibly shaky and my heart was racing, and I immediately got up and showed my teacher my shaky hands, and I told her that that person is in the room, and she, without hesitation, wrote me a pass so that I could go sit in the library and feel safe and escape the scene, basically. And she even told me that because it's only for the rest of the week, if she comes back at all, I can just go back to the library again.
Wow, yeah, no, that is really nice one. It's good for teachers to like recognize that and take that seriously, because I know of a lot of teachers that if you showed them something like that, they would just not really take it as that big of a deal or something. But that is just such a good example of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a lot of teachers would just look at the student and say, just ignore her. Just don't sit near her. Just toughen it out. And it's like that in that situation, that would have been cruel though. Like a student is being threatened and has a physical trauma response to the presence of that person. I mean, like you gotta take that pretty seriously.
Yeah, of course, and it is really good that they take that into consideration, that they just kind of know about that, and they know that type of stuff is like serious and not to be like messed with, and just be like, yeah, no, we're gonna give you a safe place, and we're gonna give you somewhere where you can feel supported instead of forcing you to be in an uncomfortable situation. That is such a good example of how more teachers should react in situations like that.
Yeah, exactly. And also, this teacher was also my IEP case manager. And so, like, she had a lot of, like, insight into my situation and my circumstances and stuff like that. And what's also really amazing is that because of how bad things were at home for me, I also quite literally had times at school where I would get frustrated or overwhelmed. And I would often leave class without permission. I would go to the main office and I would refuse to go back to class because I was just too frustrated and overwhelmed. Or there was also like 2 or 3 times throughout the school year where I actually literally ran off campus because I was so overwhelmed and frustrated. The surprising part is that I never once got any suspension or detention my entire senior year. And what that tells me, because let's admit it, administrators, they don't play about stuff like that. And they would immediately point to the policy book and say, this is the punishment for that, here's a suspension. But in my case, obviously, it wasn't just me being like defiant or just willingly trying to create stuff. It was trauma response due to what I was going through. And I have a feeling that my teacher advocated for me behind the scenes, because those administrators, I just know they were not letting it go that easily. And IEP case managers, they have a lot of authority over what happens to the students who have IEPs that are on their caseload. They have a lot of authority, and so they kind of have to balance that out with the administrators. So I have a feeling she inserted her authority to make sure that I wasn't punished when I was simply having trauma responses to everything I was going through.
Yeah, of course. Back when that was happening, like when you were running off campus and stuff, was that back when they were like forcing you to be on medication and everything?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was when they were forcing me to be on medication at home with the foster care system, and when I was just not okay at home, I was unsupported and everything.
Yeah, and it kind of seems like all that stuff kind of culminated together to get people to act like that, and it's also why it's so good to have these supportive teachers that actually understand the context of a situation. Because a lot of administrators would see someone running out of class or running off campus and be like, oh, they're obviously a bad kid, they're a defiant kid, they're just trying to get into trouble. Let's punish them for it. Because a lot of schools, I've written about this a lot. Is they have zero tolerance policies, to where it's a policy of like, if you do this behavior, you get this punishment. It's kind of like a blanket one size fits all type of thing. And a lot of schools have punishments like that. And the problem with zero tolerance policies is that they just kind of put in a one size fits all punishment rather than actually looking at the context of an individual person's situation. And with your situation, it's so important to look at that context, because it's not just someone who's like, oh yeah, I'm running off campus because I'm bored, I don't want to be here, I want to cause trouble. It's someone who's like dealing with a lot of stuff at home, dealing with issues and like the systems you're going through, and then trauma responses, being forced to be put on medication, stuff like that. And it kind of all culminates to have behavior like that. So that's why it's so important for teachers to look into this stuff and be like, no, this person isn't just trying to cause problems. Their behavior is a reaction to the situation that they're currently living in. And in those situations, you got to give them a bit more leeway so they can actually feel properly supported instead of punished.
Exactly. And like you said, I mean, like most administrators would just lean towards this one size fits all policy, when in all reality, you got to look at the context. You got to look at the student themselves. Like some students are going through stuff, and that causes behaviors that are genuinely happening because that child is in survival mode, and they really are having a difficult time and they have no support. And so in that moment, you got to give them the support and safety that they need to be able to regulate and function. And also, I frequently had like a lot on my mind where like I wouldn't even be able to focus on my schoolwork. And when I had too much on my mind, I wouldn't be able to focus, and I would just feel like I need to verbally vent it out and talk about whatever was on my mind. Well, the amazing thing about this teacher is that whenever I would have too much on my mind, I could literally go up to her while she's sitting at her desk while everybody else is working, and I could verbally say whatever's on my mind. And she would listen to me, and she would even like verbally respond to me. And unlike most teachers who would just say, that's not what we're talking about, you need to focus on your work, like she actually understood why I couldn't focus, and she understood to allow me to focus, I needed to be able to say what was on my mind.
And that's really good as well, because everybody has different styles of the way that they work on things. It's like not everybody can just sit there in front of a assignment and just like lock in for like a whole period of time. Like if someone's going through something, or like they may just need to just like you said, just have their own methods of like, okay, I gotta talk this out. There's something on my mind, I gotta do this before I can focus. And a lot of teachers would just be like, no, go back and focus. Like, what are you doing coming up trying to just talk about random stuff? But it's like, it's really good to have that recognition of, okay, if I talk to this person, it's going to help them do better in their schoolwork. It's going to help them feel supported. It's going to help them be able to focus more. If I just, take a little bit of time out of my day to just like let this person know they're supported and everything. That is such a good example of that.
Yeah, exactly. And so that teacher really was just really awesome. And then moving on to the second teacher, this second teacher was he was my American government teacher for the first semester, and then my economics teacher for the second semester. And one thing about him, he had such a great sense of humor. Like, for example, when he would be lecturing the class with like whatever the work was or whatever, or whenever he'd show us a video or whatever it may be, he would always tell us, he would say, if you have any questions, for the love of God, please ask. Like, I loved that. And I had a curious mind in that class, especially when like topics of like the government system and like laws came up. Like, I always was like curious about that kind of stuff. And sometimes, whether it was the assignment we were doing or something off topic but like still in the same like subject, like I would go up to him and ask him whatever I needed to ask and whatever questions I had, and he definitely lived up to that promise. Like, he never turned me away, never got annoyed by my questions, always fed my curiosity, and it was pretty awesome. Like, very, very amazing. And also, every time I would enter his classroom, he would ask how I'm doing, and I would say the same answer every time. I would say crazy. And eventually he caught on to that, and he started asking me how I was doing. But before I could even answer, he'd point at me with a smile and he'd say crazy.
Aww.
It was really awesome. And like, his humor made my days feel lighter and better, and it was just really awesome. And one more example from him is that in the second semester, when I was his economics student, I also actually got to be his TA for one of the class periods. And what was really awesome about that is that normally a TA is supposed to help the teacher with like grading or organizing or whatever. And I did that quite often, but sometimes if I was like behind in the economics class for him, he would actually let me sit there and catch up on my work, even though I was supposed to be his TA. Aww. And sometimes if I needed like help, he would even help me after he took care of the rest of the class. Like, he was really awesome.
That's good. And I really like what you mentioned about the stuff about how he would always like answer our questions and everything, because like teachers like that, I mean, that kind of shows that they actually enjoy their job and they enjoy what they do and they like want you to learn and they want you to like care. Like, they want you to care about what they're being taught. Because I've had a lot of teachers in the past that like you can tell they just their head isn't in the game. Like, they don't care. Like, they'll sit in front of the class, they'll put up a PowerPoint presentation and be like, okay, yeah, take notes about this and something like that. And then you ask them a question, they'll just like give like the most vague answer possible. Or they'll give some dumb answer like, oh yeah, look into your textbook or look it up or just pay attention to the PowerPoint. They'll say something dumb like that. And it's like when a teacher acts like that, it's like, they don't really care about the material. They're just kind of sitting there for a paycheck. But it's like, that's why it's so refreshing to have those teachers where it's like you can tell they care, they want you to learn, they want you to be engaged, like they want you to actually like give a crap about what they're talking about in the class. So that's why it's like such a good, like, just a positive way for a teacher to act towards students.
Yeah, exactly. And then moving on to the third teacher, this one's kind of a little bit emotional. So she was what was called my academic success teacher, and what that class was, it was basically like a study hall class for students with IEPs. So if a student had IEP, they could go to this class and it would become part of their schedule. And it's a class period where they literally aren't assigned new material, but they just work on their work from other classes and keep up their grades in there. And so that's the class I had. And this teacher, she was really awesome too, and really sweet and supportive. And what I loved about her is that she had an entire reward system set up where like she had this little like closet or pantry kind of thing of rewards, and she had a system on her computer for each class period, and the students from those class periods had their own like little name and profile, and if you presented like good behaviors and good achievements, such as raising your grades or completing assignments or just being quiet and respectful in class, stuff like that, you would get points. And once you have enough points, you can choose a reward from the reward cupboard. And he had things that ranged from like just simple bottles of water to like snacks like chips and drinks and stuff like that, all the way up to things like fidgets and school supplies.
Aw.
Like, it was really awesome. And all those rewards came out of her own pocket.
That's nice. Yeah, it's a good thing to have.
And one time, I didn't really like have any points, but like I was a little bit hungry but didn't have any points. He gave me one of the bags of chips even though I had no points.
Aw, that's sweet.
I know. And then one very big memory I have in her class is that towards the end of the school year, she did this whole activity where she had bought the supplies, and those supplies included Ziploc bags, some rags, some milk, and vanilla extract, and salt and ice. What it was making vanilla ice cream, and it was a lot of fun. Like, we were all just shaking up our bags and all just laughing and having a good time together. And she was working towards her English teaching credential. But the sad and very emotional part is that in October of 2025, so nearly a year ago, she literally passed away from cancer.
Oh, that's awful.
I know, and I saw like a little article from the university that she attended, and that article had literally stated that her professors remember her coming on Zoom because while she was on medical oxygen, because she really wanted to be in the classroom and continue to be with her students and everything like that. And that's just like really, really emotional. And I mean, it's really sad too, because like she was very supportive and cancer took her away.
Yeah, that's really upsetting, and it's sad that, someone that was nice and sweet and wanted to help their students had to happen to them. But at least, she got to, you have a lot of memories of her supporting you and everything, all the fun stuff they all got to do together.
Oh yes, for sure. Definitely very good memories. And as for the fourth teacher though, this fourth teacher, oh my gosh, probably the best one on the list if I'm being honest.
Mm-hmm.
He was my art teacher, but only for the second semester of senior year because I needed to fill in my schedule. I didn't need art credits to graduate. I just needed to fill in my schedule.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the only non-academic option available, even though I'm not really too good at doing art and I wasn't too excited for it, but it was the only one that could even work. And so I went in there, and it was not very long before this teacher understood my situation and my circumstances and the fact that I didn't even need the art to graduate. And what he basically did was he basically turned his classroom into like a whole sanctuary for me by letting me just sit there, didn't force me to do no art assignments, and he let me sit there with my two art class friends I had at the time, and I could just sit there and breathe and be myself, and it felt like a really good sanctuary and a decompression space for me. And it just felt like a place where like I could breathe and just be happy and be myself. And it was really, really amazing. And then the really ultimate best part is that teacher and I, of all my teachers, that teacher and I are still in touch to this day. And he's still super supportive, super funny. And at this point, honestly, I wouldn't even say that we're still just like in that teacher-student phase. I would say we've crossed into chosen family.
Well, that's great. No, I'm really glad that you had that, and he kind of recognized that that's just what you needed at that time, and that was having a safe place was more important than having an art class.
Right. And the way I look at it now is it's like, I feel like healing is a form of art in itself. And so the way I look at it is like, instead of the traditional art on paper, he told me, you know what? You're a little different. You're doing the art of healing around here.
Yeah, that's actually a really good way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I said, me and him are still in touch. We usually call once every 1 to 2 weeks, and we just talk and check in and everything. And we actually have seen each other twice since I graduated. One of the other amazing things about that teacher in particular is that I'm always telling him, like, look, dude, you saved my life. Like, you were one of the only support people that I had back then. Like, you have basically saved my life, and you still actively choose to be there for me and support me to this day. And this man, he's so humble. He shifts the credit back onto me and says, well, Bailey, you are the one who did all the work and put in all the strength. I just was lucky enough to walk alongside you.
Aw, that's nice.
I know. And another thing is that I'm about to tell you what each of those 4 teachers had signed in my yearbook. Because I still have my yearbook with their signatures. So the first teacher, the first one I mentioned, who was my IEP case manager, she had written, Bailey, it has been a great pleasure getting to know you this year. I wish you much happiness in the future.
Aw.
And then that teacher who was my economics and American government teacher, the one who had that great humor, he signed in it and said, it was an honor. Thank you for your hard work, help, kind words, etc. I wish you the best. Good luck out there, and stay crazy.
Aw.
And then the third one, the one who had sadly passed away, she had written, Bailey, congratulations on graduating. I hope you have a great summer. I look forward to seeing all the wonderful things that you will accomplish in the future.
Oh, that's sweet.
And the last one, the art teacher, he had written, Bailey, what a year. Well, it's only been a semester in art, but the amazing bond we have been able to create is amazing. Stay in touch and keep doing great.
That's nice. That one feels so like personal.
Yeah, it really, really does. And it is personal because we're literally still in touch.
Yeah, for sure. And it's good to have that, like, to have that type of environment in a school, just have that type of safe place in general, because, not everyone has that in their, like, life outside of school. Like, if you in a toxic home environment, or especially with what you were going through with the foster care system and all that, it's like, not everybody has a place where they can just, decompress and just talk to people they want to talk to and just, like, enjoy their time. And, teachers recognizing that and, giving students that is probably one of the best things that they can give them. And it's such a good example of what teachers should recognize and try to be in their students' lives.
Exactly. And in all honesty, I have a feeling that, like, if it weren't for these teachers, there's a high chance I wouldn't have even graduated.
Yeah. That's why it's just so important for teachers to, recognize this stuff in their students and, do their best to support them. Because, being a teacher is more than just like, oh, yeah, sit here and do your work. It's like, I actually here for you. You're in my class. I recognize what you're going through, you as a person. I'm going to do my best to help you.
Exactly. And that's how I look at it, too. Like, those teachers looked at me and they saw a human being who needed support and safety, rather than just looking at me like another name on the computer.
Yeah. And it's like, when you have those teachers that do look at students like, oh yeah, you're just another name on a computer, I'm going to sit in front of this screen and read a PowerPoint, I'm going to, like, not care about your individual needs, and, like, I'm just going to just see. When you have those teachers that you can tell they don't really care that much, it makes it all the better to get one of those good teachers that, like, you can tell that they care, they want you to learn, they want you to be supported, and they, like, actually want to be a positive influence on your life, rather than just like, I'm gonna teach your class. Like, because teachers they have the ability, like we talked about, they have the ability to have that impact. And it's like, if you have the ability to do this, if you have the ability to make such a positive impact on the life of someone who needs it, just like, why not do it? Why not be the positive?
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, I mean, like, why not be the positive in those students' lives when you're fully able to do so? I mean, and it's just really unfortunate how, like, some teachers they just don't care about the student needs. They just care about getting it all over with and getting their paycheck. And I mean, it's kind of crazy too, because it's like, they went through a bunch of training to get there. Why not use that to make like other students' lives feel better and feel supported and everything.
Yeah, of course. I think that's kind of a good message to just leave off on with these teachers is just, if you are a teacher and you're watching this, just kind of look at this stuff that we're talking about and just be like, there's little things you can do. I mean, there's big things, of course, but there's just even little things you can do just to show your students that you care and that you want them to learn, you want them to like have a safe place and you want them to be supported and you want them to know that just like you actually are there for their benefit instead of just, trying to be a teacher in a classroom. And I think that's kind of a good message to leave off on. Is there anything else you want to bring up with any of these teachers or anything?
Yeah, no, I just want to emphasize what you said, and if you just support those students and make them know that they are loved and safe and supported in your classroom, trust me, it definitely will leave a very beautiful impact on them, and your heroic actions will not be forgotten.
Yeah, of course. That's kind of just what you got to know about it is just you have the potential to do great things and just be that change in your student's life and just show them that you're there for them. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your stories and everything. I really hope that it put some positivity into the air because a lot of the times we're talking about negative things relating to youth rights, but this is a good positive thing. Just be like, yeah, teachers, this is a way that you can help people. This is a student who is her life is a lot better because of the impact of these great teachers, and it's like you can do that. You have the potential to do that. Like, just be that change. But yeah, thank you for sharing your stories and everything, and we'll talk to you all in the next episode. Bye bye, everyone.